So this is a cool topic, and if you've heard some of our other sessions, and especially the ones that I've given, there will be some familiar themes that you'll hear throughout this webinar. It's something that we talk about a lot, and so we're going to talk in this one about kind of the evolution of how intranets and how these things have changed and how we communicate with people have changed. So if you're doing an intranet now or starting an intranet, hopefully there'll be some things in here that you can take away. Before we get started, what I want to do is quickly do a poll to see where everyone is with intranets, and everybody's got different reasons. So I'd love to hear in the questions if you want to ask a question. Feel free to do that in the question section of the GoToWebinar. But what intranet solutions are you using? So I'm going to launch this poll, and you guys will see it there on your screen. And if you guys could kind of fill that in, just take 1 or 2 seconds just to say, hey, here's what we're using today. We're gonna start using something. We are using something. I'll leave it open for just a couple more minutes to see where everyone is with this. All right, so let's look at the results. So by far, right, everyone here is using SharePoint as 100% of the people that are doing this, or going to start SharePoint. So that's good, because that's one of the main areas where we focus. And for those that are on the webinar, that's probably one of the reasons you joined this, and maybe knowing what we do here at C5. So let's keep going and jump right in, and that'll kind of help me frame up the rest of the session as we go throughout this. So for those that don't know me, here's my contact information on the screen. Feel free to reach out to me, take a screenshot of this, grab this, and would love to connect with you on LinkedIn, reach out and follow us on Twitter, or shoot me an email if there's anything that's going on, or you want to bounce something off of me. I'm one of the co-founders and managing partners here at C5 Insight, and our mission is pretty simple. We want technology to work for people and not the other way around. And we find so many organizations that are taking technology, kind of throwing it into their organization and saying, hey, go work on this and go use this technology, and there's so many other things missing. So we actually do a lot with project failure, project rescue, helping organizations kind of figure out why this technology hasn't worked. And there's some pretty clear formulaic kind of things that lead to why projects are struggling, especially intranets and SharePoint projects as a whole. So that's where we spend, and especially for me, I spend nearly 100% of my time focusing on why collaboration fails, employee engagement, how do we get people engaged, using it, adoption, ROI, those kind of things. And that's where I spend all my time with our clients as well. So if you guys want to be social while we're on this, please don't be shy about that. There's a couple hashtags here and some Twitter handles that you guys can follow us. And even if you don't share, feel free to follow C5 Insight and C5 Curtis. You'll find out about our latest events, what's going on, blogs that we post, things like that. So if you're on Twitter, it's a great way to follow us there as well. So how many of you guys do the same thing the same way you did it 10, 15, 20 years ago? Heck, even 5 years ago, right? Or even a year ago. Things are changing all the time. And so part of where I want to spend the first 15, 20 minutes or so is really painting a picture of where we've come and how things are changing in our organizations. And the more I've done these presentations, the more I've actually put a lot more time into this section. A lot of people are like, hey, just get to the meat of this thing. Just show us how to quote unquote fix our intranets. And it's really about more than that. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of build this up, and we're going to talk about the evolution of not just intranets, but the evolution of what an intranet's actually trying to do in our organizations, right? The way we communicate has changed inside of our organizations, and the people inside of our organizations, the technology, all kinds of things have changed. So how is that actually affecting the end product, the end result? And it's affecting it more than you guys think. Then I'm going to kind of go through and talk about, all right, now we know the evolution and how things are changing. Why are companies not getting it? Why are companies struggling? And I'm going to give you a few areas where you guys can maybe see yourself in those and say, hey, these are some areas where we can improve. And if we can kind of eliminate these 4, 5, 6 things, it's going to help us. It's going to help us move forward better. And then the last thing I'll talk about, as I do in most of my presentations, is, all right, how can we turn this around? What are some key takeaways that I can take back to my organization and my project and figure out how to move forward better? So that's what we're going to do over the next 55 minutes or so. And again, if you have any questions, I'll try to answer those as we go through this. It'll be hard while I'm doing it, but I'll try to follow up. but we get a list of all the questions, so I'll know who asked them, and I absolutely will follow up with every single question that is asked inside the question. So please feel free to ask questions. I will respond to you personally in the next couple of days and answer those questions. So please ask away. So, you know, changes have been happening in our culture and in our organizations for decades now. You know, and some of them very obvious to us. We see kind of things changing all around us in technology and people and you know, new hires and things like that. But some have actually been a little more subtle, and we don't really recognize. And when I go through this with a lot of, you know, our clients and talking to other organizations, a lot of them are surprised by some of these things that are happening. And I think it's really important to discuss what's actually happening inside of our organizations, because that's the foundation for why we're doing these things. You can't, if you're going to do an intranet, if you're going to do a collaboration project, SharePoint, whatever it is, there's always this foundational piece of your organization and how your organization is going to respond to that, and the people that are actually going to use these tools, right? And we'll talk more about people in just a minute. So I want to dive in and kind of just spend, again, like I said, the next 15, 20 minutes just talking about the things that are going on in organizations, so you guys can be equipped to handle these and not kind of, you know, have our heads in the sand, because like it or not, these things are happening all around us, and they're going to keep happening whether we want to believe them or not within our projects. So let's jump in and tackle them head on. So you guys have all probably seen the stats on, you know, what's going on and how we're spending our time in our organizations. And you guys may have seen these stats before. Maybe some of these are new for you guys. And again, a lot of my time is spent on understanding what's going on. So I've got tons of stats, and you'll see a lot of stats in here. And again, I don't want this to be, you know, the C5 stats. So I try to show stats from all different kinds of organizations and people that are thought leaders and leaders out there in the marketplace for these kind of things. So if you look at this, it looks like we're spending an awful lot of time meeting and communicating with each other, right? I mean, the emails received actually didn't surprise me that much. 62 meetings a week, 36 email checks per hour. We're checking our email. We're living in email. We spend 10 hours, 25% of our weeks, if it's a 40-hour week almost, you know, searching for information, not even just doing our job, just trying to gather information so that we can actually do our job. So there's a lot of things going on. So it looks like we're spending a lot of time, quote unquote, collaborating, right? But when you look at this, what's interesting is that 60+%, so 3 out of 5 organizations are still struggling or flat out failing with SharePoint and with Intranet and with social collaboration. There's still, and that's an AIIM stat, 63% as of 2015. It's actually gone up since 2013 when they did the last study. So as things are getting better, we're getting worse at collaborating, even with great technology. So why is this happening? Well, here's the deal. We think there's something more to this. When we step back and look at this holistic, you know, take a holistic view of this thing called collaboration, to us it's more than just awesome technology like SharePoint and like all the, you know, OneDrive and 365 and whatever it is you're doing, maybe even CRM, Salesforce, some other collaboration platform. It's more than building an intranet and having a cool homepage where everybody can kind of come and start their day. And it's even more than just trying to be more productive and getting more things done, right? We see collaboration and these things that you guys are trying to do are impacting other areas throughout the organization, like employee engagement, talent retention, hiring. You know, so I don't know all the groups you guys are in. You guys may be in IT, you guys may be on the project side or within the business, but there's all kinds of things that this touches. So what we've seen is this transformation of people still think this is kind of an IT thing, a technology thing, and it's actually permeating, and if you don't get it right, it's actually affecting and impacting HR and hiring and communication and marketing and all kinds of things. Even customers are being affected by poor collaboration, right? And I'll talk about some of those stats later. So over the next few minutes, what I want to do is share 3 key areas where I believe I've seen the greatest changes to how we collaborate within our organizations. And I want to break those out, each of those 3 things, so you guys can start to focus and again have this kind of map of where are things changing and how can I make sure that I'm addressing those things. Because if you know about them, then you can address them. If you don't know about them, then you don't know they're happening around you, and you're going to miss them. So let's dive in and kind of talk through those. So how many of you guys would say that technology hasn't changed at all over the last 20 years, right? I mean, it's changed a ton, right? So we're all on the same page with that. But if I were to sit here and talk about all the technological changes and how things are changing, gosh, even over the last year, I'd be here all day, right, talking about that. I mean, these things are changing at light speed, and we've got to be real careful with this because you know, you get into this hey, new and shiny and quick fix, and that's kind of the world we live in, and I'll talk about that as well. Taking technology and trying to throw technology at these issues, and we work with clients every single day. I'm not kidding you, that have tried 2, 3, 4, sometimes more times different technologies at the same problem and still getting the same results. And so I think that's the definition of insanity, right? When you're trying the same thing over and over, expecting different results. It's not about technology. So what I want to do over the next few minutes is call out you know, three areas within technology where we've seen the biggest changes and that you guys need to be aware of as we kind of get into this. So the first one is obviously from the social standpoint, right? I mean, you guys have seen social take over. Every single one of you is probably on at least, you know, one of these: Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, whatever it is. I mean, there's a ton of different social things out there. So we are now a social society. I mean, that is how we are. That's how we're going to be going forward, and that affects how we interact. I mean, you guys are used to kind of this pushing of this news feed and kind of consuming people's information. And in fact, we've actually seen, there was a study done by Microsoft earlier, I think it was actually last year, that actually showed that because of all this kind of short-wave social, you know, 140 characters on Twitter and these kind of reading newsfeed snippets and these quick updates and texting and all this stuff, it's actually changing our brains over time. And we actually have a shorter attention span now than a goldfish. We have an 8-second attention span on any given thought. We spend about 8 seconds before we think about the next thought. So it's insane. So, I mean, if you think that doesn't affect how people are using these tools, you know, you have to rethink that, right? You have to start thinking about, hey, you know, this is the way we work now. We don't work by just having a bunch of content out there and having people say, hey, go consume it. We've got to adapt to how people want to consume information. So this goes directly to the heart of kind of intranets and how you want to use them. And everybody has to define what an intranet is to you. I won't go through exactly how to define your intranet, but I'm happy to kind of talk after this. If you want to shoot an email or jump on the phone with something, I can talk through kind of how to help you define what does an intranet need to do for you. So hopefully I'll give you some of those. So again, this concept of social, sharing, liking, information coming to us, it's changing how we operate, and it's something you guys need to think about as well. One of the interesting things, there's a couple stats here on the screen that you guys can see. I mean, again, just putting it in perspective, one of the things we deal with, and I'll talk about in just a minute, so I don't want to steal too much of my thunder, is the generational changes that are going on in our organization. And so on the left, you can see this stat of 55% of Americans in this upper, you know, 45 to 54 age range, which typically hasn't used a lot of social media. You've now crossed the threshold that the more of them are using social media, or at least have a profile, than do not. That's a big shift, and I think that's actually good for organizations, because now it's not just, hey, if we put social strategies into our organizations, including intranet, the younger guys are going to use it, and the other guys that have been around a while and in their mid to late 40s and 50s are not really using it as much. And we've actually seen that. So we want everyone to kind of collaborate, because that's where you get the biggest bang for your buck, is when the entire organization can kind of talk the same language. So this is a really good thing that now we're starting to get this kind of mainstream usage across all age groups. And then it really surprised me that, you know, over 30%, or about 30% of our entire world population is active on social media. So social is not something that, people are using it, some people do, some people don't. This has gone pretty mainstream, and it's hit critical mass, right? So I think it's safe to say, hey, we can start using social strategies, and people, even if they don't use it every day, they get it and they understand how it works, and they probably used it at least one time. So that's going to be a big thing as you guys head into your into your strategy for your intranet. The next thing I want to talk about is kind of this mobile aspect, right? And I don't even need to spend a ton of time here, because you guys get this. We've been mobile for a long time, but I mean, today with tablets and iPads and iPhones and watches, smartwatches, that's the new thing, right? All these wearables that you've got on you now. We've got email attached to our wrist, right? We've got all these different things and connections, right? We're connected all the time, and whether it's good or bad, or where you stand on that, we are connected, and we have anytime access, anywhere access. And so those things need to be in the back of your mind when you guys approach developing intranets and collaborative solutions, right? You guys need to think about, these people aren't just, shutting down when they leave at the end of the day. People are hopping back on. I heard this new term it's not work-life balance anymore, it's work-life alignment. And it's really true. I mean, I'll leave here at 2 o'clock, go to the gym, get back online later. I leave here and go, spend time with, I've got a little toddler before he has to go to bed early and then jump back on later. I mean, everybody's shifting their work, and all of you guys that are on this webinar probably spend some of your time working remote or working somewhere else, right, besides the office, maybe even traveling. So we've got to take that in mind. It's not just come into a corporate office and jump on this nice, intranet anymore and just sit down and that's where we get our information. We've got to be able to figure out how to consume this stuff in different ways on different devices, and that's going to be a big deal. A stat to kind of go along with that, if you didn't kind of believe that, is that, right now for the first time, I don't know if this is surprising or sad or what it is, but more people have a mobile phone in the world than actually have a toothbrush. There's a study done and kind of did those. So 4 billion people have a mobile phone. So that kind of proves the point. We are a mobile society. We are mobile, and every single person in your office, I can guarantee, probably has a mobile device of some sort, at least one. There's another study I read that said we each have at least 3 internet-connected devices each, and I guarantee you guys probably even have more than that if you count all your tablets and all the other devices. So we're definitely mobile, and we need to take that into account. The last thing in this area of technology is kind of just this what I'm calling the data deluge, right? This just influx of all this data that's coming at us. And I mean, you guys have probably heard of big data, and then now that's transitioned into this Internet of Things, where every single thing that's connected is now putting this data out there. So if we were to step back and just look at your organization, maybe it's not Internet of Things, and maybe it doesn't have, a server room that kind of looks like this and all this different data, but you guys are generating data at a very rapid rate, and it's growing astronomically, and I'll show you a couple stats in a minute for that. So you've got to have a way to collect that corporate memory, that corporate knowledge that is being generated, and we can't just rely on our memory anymore, and we've got to have a place to kind of capture that so that the next groups that come in, and so that we can start to use that data to share and make better decisions. So how are you guys going to take this data and start to make sense of it, whether it's documents and content, whether it's something else, lists and libraries, or something else that you guys are doing within SharePoint? How are you going to take that data and make good use and make it shareable, make it easy to find? So a couple things on this. It was an interesting study, that came out and basically talking about how 90% of the data that was created in the world was created in the last 2 years. So we're on this exponential curve of data creation within our organizations and all over. So we're creating a ton of data. How are we going to capture that? How are we going to make it useful? On the flip side of that, we've got all this data out there. 3% is actually useful, tagged, and can actually be found easily later. And we actually see there was a stat that said 70% of organizations, or 70% of content, is recreated because people can't find it fast enough. So they basically throw in the towel and say, I can't find it, so I'm just going to recreate it. It's probably quicker for me to recreate it. So how much of that is being duplicated and effort being wasted because people can't find things? So that goes through findability and metadata and information architecture and how we're going to find these things. So you got to have a strategy for. We can't just throw all this data in there and hope that SharePoint search is going to magically make it appear for us, right? How are we going to approach that? You guys understand that, our workforce is changing, right? We're changing in a number of different ways. And I want to look at just a couple areas here that about kind of, the movement that's happening inside of our organization. So the first one you guys have heard, I'm sure you guys have heard about the millennial movement, right? And the millennial shift. And we have a lot of these conversations today because the millennial generation has come in, and within the next 5 years will be a majority of the workforce will be this millennial generation, and then in 5 more years, in 2020, you'll have the next generation, Gen Z or Gen 2020, that's coming out. So how do you affect that? And a lot of people just say, well, it's just new people coming in. But as new people come in, other people sometimes leave, sometimes they don't, and so you start to have this mixing of people that have grown up with the internet, grown up with Twitter, grown up in different ways, and you got to take that into account. That's how people are. That's their personality. That's how they operate. That's how they work. So we've got to help people work together in different ways. So I'll show you a couple stats on that. So the first one is that, millennials coming into the organization, I talked about how they're going to be the majority. 2/3 of them are leaving for something other than money. So only 1/3 are leaving for money, 2/3 are leaving for something else. So what is that? A lot of it has to do with how engaged they are. Are they working on great projects? Are they doing it? We've actually seen some organizations tell us that they've had people leave when they kind of do exit interviews because their technology was outdated and they weren't kind of leading edge, on what's going on. And maybe that's Intranet, maybe that's something else. But again, your technology and your information and your intranets are going to help with some of that retention. The other thing that's kind of interesting to this is that in addition to them leaving for something other than money, they're only staying about 3 years. And so again, this is a shift. This isn't the kind of the organizations that, my dad worked in where you stay somewhere 20, 30 plus years and retire there, right? You have very, very little of that, and most are moving on within 3 years. And this is really important, going back to kind of how you capture data, because it's just enough time, if you think about 3 years, just enough time to come in, learn the ropes, learn your business, create some data, do some things, and then kind of move on. So you've got to make sure, one, if you know this, how do we make sure we're capturing information, capturing knowledge from day one? So that whatever this millennial creates, if they're going to leave, we want to retain them, but if they're going to leave in 3 years, how do we make sure we capture all the knowledge and all the processes and all the things, the ideas and the innovation they've generated in 3 years? How do we make sure we're capturing that so that whoever else it is comes into that role can help and use that information? And then, like I said, the last thing is that in the next 5 years or so, they're going to make up the majority. So this is going to be the majority. The majority of our organizations, basically what this says is, going to be leaving for other things besides money. So it's not money that's going to retain them. They need to have these tools and have this connectedness. But they're all going to be leaving. So does that mean half of our organizations are going to be turning over every 3 years or so? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But it's definitely something to think about. So how are you going to put processes in place to capture this information, to capture this knowledge? So it's something definitely worth thinking about and worth looking at. The next thing I want to talk about is kind of the power of a network, right? So within our workforce, and this kind of goes back to the social piece, is that we're very connected, right? We're well connected within our organizations. And there was actually a study that came out by MIT and NYU that said that people who were well connected to a wide range of colleagues and employees that were well connected generated on average about $83,000 more in revenue. So there was a study, and again, it's a crazy study. The link's on the bottom of this slide, or the study name, and you can go Google it and find it out there. But it's pretty interesting. There was a lot of crazy math in there as well, but there is some science that goes, and direct, math that goes with if you're more well connected, whether it's LinkedIn, whether it's internally, whether it's with other people that you have colleagues in other organizations, you do generate more revenue and you do things better. So we've actually seen this play out in a lot of ways, and I'll talk about how to better connect using an intranet a little later on as we close out this session. The last thing I want to talk about is how we're now kind of in this self-taught. I always like to say we're focused on, we're moving from courses to resources. So I don't know when the last time you guys sat through an entire training course, and if you did, how effective was it to sit through a one or multiple day training or some sort of event that you went through? We don't do training that way anymore, depending on the group. We do a lot of different training strategies these days. The other one is, when's the last time you walked into a bookstore and bought a reference book and brought it home and read it and things like that, right? It's not that way anymore. So the way we find new information and the way we learn is we go to resources. We work until we hit a wall, and then we Google it, then we find, then we reach out. And so we're very task-oriented. We're very oriented toward, I need to solve that one problem, then you go back to doing your job. So contextual help, contextual search, people want to know, and this is a huge shift that we've seen and that we're starting to do now, and there's some great tools out there and reach out, and I can let you know a few of those that actually do contextual help within SharePoint and some other things, so that if someone's on a list or library, you can actually give them specific help or some snippets of videos. So we've done videos from 2 to 5 minutes because, again, our attention spans, we don't want this 30-minute video on how to upload documents. Show me quickly how to drag and drop or how to upload a document in a library. 2 minutes, boom, there's your thing. And don't show it so I have to sort through 100 videos. Show it to me with a link right there in the document library, right? So every document library has a link. So there's just some strategies of how we're going to do these things differently, because we do want to focus on contextual, help and contextual resources as well. And then the last thing I want to talk about from a change standpoint, so we talked about technology, we've talked about kind of the workforce changing, is our business, and it's changing at light speed. And most of you guys probably heard of this little firm called Enron a few years ago, right? They gave us this nice compliance, and they kind of started the snowball of all this compliance and SOX and HIPAA and all kinds of different regulatory things that are going on, and there's a ton of regulation out there. So our businesses have changed a lot. You guys, every single one of you on this webinar, probably has some sort of regulation or compliance that you have to adhere to, some sort of thing. So it's across every one of our organizations. So we've got more scrutiny. We've got new roles like chief compliance officer and different demands and everything like that. And there was a study that came out. I think this one was from Gartner, that basically said in the next couple years, the number of Fortune 100 companies that will face an information crisis is over a third of those, because they can't govern, trust their enterprise information, and those kind of things. So how are you guys doing that? How are you guys putting the proper things in place to help with compliance, to help with tagging, auditing, making sure that is it outdated content? What is your policy for rolling that off? What is your retention policy? Those kind of things. So think about, it's more than just, hey, here's a bunch of information, go find it, and we'll help you get to it easier and show you the latest news on the homepage. How are you guys going to actually affect this? And most of you guys are probably thinking from an intranet standpoint that it's got this huge document management piece to it, especially if you're using SharePoint. So how are we going to leverage the tool to help us effectively govern and manage and trust this information? And so there's going to be a big problem with a lot of information. Again, we've got huge amounts of data going in these things. 3% are being tagged. That's a recipe for disaster and a perfect storm kind of waiting to happen. Again, a lot of organizations kind of going lean and mean. I don't need to spend a ton time here, but companies are doing more with less. So how do you get more value out of those? How do you squeeze as much value out of this intranet, out of SharePoint as you guys can? And again, you guys are probably looking at SharePoint. Those that were using SharePoint, you guys are looking at SharePoint, I'm sure, for more than just the intranet. Probably using it for doc management, probably using workflows, all kinds of different things. How do we do more with less? And what is our plan for using this? And not just let's throw it at it and use it for whatever we can and try to make it the silver bullet, but having a real plan for how we can leverage this and what is our ROI and how are we going to get business value out of this. And I'll talk about that later as well. And then the last thing on the business side is we're global organizations all over the world. I mean, you guys probably talk to someone that's not in your office every single day, maybe not even in this country or in your country every single day. So we're doing business all over the world. And again, goes back to kind of the mobility of our organizations. We've got to be prepared not only for people being on the move and people being everywhere, but working with different cultures. How are you guys handling different cultures? How are you guys communicating? Because intranets are communication platforms. How are you guys communicating with employees that are in China and Hong Kong and India and Korea and Europe and Africa and wherever else they are, right? How are you guys communicating with them, and how are you going to make it easy for those folks to work together and to come together to connect? Because if there's a barrier between these groups, then innovation and everything else comes to a halt, right? We've got to make it easy for information to flow between all of our different groups of people. So how does this all come together? Well, this is actually what we see happen. So you take these three areas, technology, the workforce, the business, and you add all these up. And ultimately what you get is this disconnect. And the changes across these three areas, technology, people, our businesses, they really are creating this disconnect where people are like, man, there's a whole lot of change going on. And I don't know about you guys, but I haven't found anybody that loves change yet, right? So there's a lot of things going on inside the organization, especially at the executive level, that are trying to kind of get a handle on these things and trying to do more with these platforms. They're struggling because they're focusing on, well, let's just get this great tool and it's going to solve all these problems, but they're failing to understand these specific problems. And maybe you don't have any problems in the workforce area. Maybe your problems are in technology and business, or maybe they're in workforce and technology. So understanding where do you have the biggest pains and the biggest changes going on, that's going to help. So let's talk about what this actually looks like and how this disconnect actually manifests itself inside of our organization. So for the next few minutes, I'll spend kind of talking through 6 areas where I'm seeing it, this disconnect and these changes manifest itself. And this is where we're going to start to really bridge the gap between all these changes going on and when the rubber hits the road, what are people doing inside their organizations? And again, if you've heard us speak or heard me speak especially before, we talk a lot about failure. We talk a lot about the things going on inside organizations that are not working right. A lot of people don't want to talk about failure. They want to talk about success. We actually think you learn more from looking at other people's failures than you do by looking at other people's success. So that's what I'm going to show. I'm going to show you 6 areas where organizations are struggling right now. And if you see any of these in your organization, now's the time to kind of say, all right, Curtis, we're doing, you know, unrealistic expectations. We definitely have that. How do I get a handle on that? What do we do? So hopefully you guys will see some things in here that'll really help. So I don't know about you guys, but I've been let down before, right? I think all of us on this webinar have probably been let down before. And a lot of times being let down, they say kind of comes from your expectations being too high. And sometimes that's the case, sometimes it's not. But we see a lot of organizations, again, that focus on kind of taking your tools such as SharePoint and putting it in an organization and saying, hey, we just want to go from you know 0 to 100 overnight. We want to go from what we sometimes say the footpath to the superhighway, right? We've got this path that's been worn, and we're kind of, you know, doing all right. We've got a bunch of Excel sheets and Access databases, and we're getting our job done, and it works, but it's not great. And we want to go to the superhighway. Let's throw SharePoint in there, and that's going to happen. And I don't know about you, but we've never seen that happen to this day, right? No construction project, no road widening project happens overnight, right? There's a process, there's construction. So helping organizations and the users understand that there's going to be this process that things have to go through, and that's part of what we do when we sit down and talk to organizations. Is part of it is a reframe to say, look, there's going to be some changes. You're going to slow down a little bit before you speed up, but here's the benefit. And part of that is managing the user expectations of, hey, this way was easier before. I built the old way. I could do that with my eyes closed. Now you've got this new way, helping them understand, again, what's in it for me. It's still a what's in it for me world, right? And so what am I going to get when this is done? I may slow down for the first 2 weeks, month, whatever it is, but here's how this is going to help me in the long run. I'm going to be able to save this much time. You know what? I might actually get to take a vacation this year, whatever it is, helping people understand that when you go into this, you've got to have your eyes wide open and make sure that, again, it's not a one-size-fits-all, and we've got to take some time to make sure this is the right fit. And there are going to be some new ways of doing things, and that's okay because progress almost always has to do with change, right? So the next thing is, you know, having a plan, knowing where you're going. And most of you guys, again, you know, if you guys have ever been on a road trip or taken a road trip, when you guys started out, I guarantee you planned exactly, you know, obviously where you were starting and where you wanted to end up, probably the exact route you were taking. Are you going, you know, if I'm going from North Carolina to California, am I going north, you know, through the Dakotas? Am I going through Texas? What time of year is it? What is the weather along the way? Where do I want to stop and take breaks and stay overnight as I'm taking this long multi-day trip? We go through all that process, but it's amazing to me how many organizations have no roadmap, no plan, more than just a punch list, really, of this is what the business needs. Before they start on these projects, they embark on this way bigger than a cross-country trip, a lot more risk for sure, without any clear roadmap of where they're going. How do we know when we've gotten there? What are the check boxes that we can check? We often say when you know when you're actually done. So again, what does done actually look like? If we're building an intranet, what does an intranet, first of all, mean to you? Is it just a corporate communication tool? Is it document management? Do we want to do workflows? Is it a lot of process automation? Is it just pretty and it's read-only and pushing information out? I mean, you've got to define what that means and what it means for your organization. And it could mean one of these things, all of these things, none of these things, right? So again, what does it actually mean? But then if you peel that back, a lot of people say, well, we need an intranet. First question I ask is, why? Because there's always something driving why you need an intranet. Is it because you want to communicate better? Is it really that you need document management and better information architecture and ways to find information better, and you're calling it an intranet? So again, taking some time to just step back and think about what are we trying to accomplish here, guys? And I'll give you guys some questions at the end of this to ask yourself as you go through. But again, where are you going? Why are you going there? What do your goals look like? Are they measurable? How are we actually going to know when we've achieved the intranet? If we say, all right, we want an intranet, how can I check that box? What is the definition of a successful intranet? Have those things actually listed down, that we need to do this. Right now we have this many people, you know, seeing our news. We need to have a 50% increase in people that actually know what's going on in our company. Maybe that's what you're looking at. So have clear metrics of what are we actually trying to accomplish here, right? So many organizations don't have a plan for that. The next thing is really near and dear to me because this is what I talk about a ton. I've got an entire presentation called The Human Factor, talking about how people are actually the core secret sauce, the most important piece, one of the most important pieces to your collaboration projects, and especially intranets. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but if you build this nice, great thing that you may call an intranet, or that you're using SharePoint for, or whatever you're doing with it, and no one uses it, I can guarantee you what your ROI is going to be, and that's going to be zero, right? ROI comes from use of the technology and not from just implementing the technology. So if you guys just put the technology out there and no one's using it, it's pointless. So it makes sense to step back and say, well, what do the people actually want? And this isn't just going around and just interviewing people and things like that. It goes much deeper than that, and trying to figure out sometimes, what people say they want is actually what they need, and trying to understand that. We've actually got a process. If you know anything about our organization, we have this acronym LUCK, L-U-C-K, listen, understand, connect, and know. We've actually trademarked the LUCK principle as well, and writing a book on it as well. We actually take that and we have LUCK storming sessions, what we call them LUCK storming, where we go into organizations, and some organizations bring us in just to do LUCK storming to help suss out this information and to gather information from the users in a unique way where they get involved and they're voting on the walls and they're doing this very interactive way, and they're giving us information. Sometimes they don't even know, not in a sneaky way, but that they didn't even know they had these issues, right? And so we work with organizations to really get out the information they need to about the users. So make sure not only that you're getting users involved and that you're really truly understanding how can I make this group or my users better, and how can I bring people together, because these things, we've got huge silos in our organization. How do I make sure that I'm giving this group clear value when we roll this out, focusing on them when it comes to training, when it comes to how they get involved with the value, and how you align them with what you're actually trying to do. It's amazing how far communication will go inside of an organization when you just communicate to your users, this is where we're going, this is why we're doing it, here's how it's going to be better. It's amazing how adoption and everything else kind of goes up when you do that. So again, people always support what they help create. So get people involved, get people on the team, because they're going to be much more likely to adopt it and to work with you and to use it than they are if you just do something in a silo, in a vacuum, and just come back out and say, hey, here's your new intranet. Glad you could, hope you can use it. Go use it now, right? Again, this one's probably top 1 or 2 as well. But I'd already mentioned this a lot, and I talk a ton about this. We've got a ton of blogs out there on this. We've seen something that if there's one thing that's really certain to fail any SharePoint project or any intranet or collaborative project, it's focusing on the tools and letting the tools drive your decisions. And so I know most of you guys had said at the time we started the webinar that 100% of you were using SharePoint as kind of your tool of choice. And that's okay that you kind of made that selection. It's a great tool. We run our entire business on Dynamic CRM, an accounting package, and SharePoint, our entire organization. So we love the tool. We believe in the tool. But what happens is when you take the tool and you set it down in the middle and you say, all right, now how do we use SharePoint to do this, to do that, to do the other? You're asking the wrong questions, right? And the analogy I always like to use is that you've got a bunch of tools in your garage, right? And just like SharePoint is one of many tools in your organization you can use. Well, it's like walking out on a Saturday morning, grabbing a hammer off your tool bench and saying, all right, now what can I do with this tool? And you walk around your house and just looking for something to hammer on, right? You're looking, how can I use this tool? What are some good things I can hammer on? Maybe you find a screw that needs to be screwed in. You're like, well, I got a hammer. It'll probably work. And you start banging that. Or you walk to your neighbor, Bob, and say, hey, Bob, how do you use your hammer? What are you doing with your hammer? And it's crazy. We kind of chuckle at that. But it is crazy, and that's how organizations are doing. They come to us and say, hey, we got SharePoint. Tell us how to use it. And my first question is, what are you trying to solve? What are you trying to do with this thing? And again, it's part of that reframe that we help organizations kind of get readjusted and pointed toward kind of a true North Star, because a lot of times we see this quick fix, this shiny new, SharePoint in 2013 and 2016 is coming out, and all this great stuff it's going to have, and moving to the cloud and 365. And I can guarantee you we've seen it hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times over and over and over. This is all we do. Technology alone never solves the problem you're trying to solve, period. If you can take anything away from the webinar, it's that. So again, don't let the tools drive what you're doing. Lay the tool aside. It's a great tool. It's okay to look at it sometimes through the lens of that tool, because you want to kind of know what it does. But what are you actually trying to do? Forget about the tool. Tools aren't, the internet piece, right? What are you trying to do? Are you trying to communicate better? Are you trying to give people a way to get involved? Are you trying to whatever, right? Focus on that and then come back and say, all right, now which tool is right to do that? Sometimes it's SharePoint, sometimes it's maybe CRM, ERP. What's the right tool to do that? You'll have a much, much higher likelihood of success. We talked about compliance a little earlier on, and this is one of the ones we've seen really take off. I think especially with the talk about governance. And don't hear me wrong. We are strong proponents of governance. We have governance toolkits, governance boot camps that we do with users to help them develop governance documents. we always, I mean, we don't work with any organization that's doing roadmap and planning without putting steering committee and governance and these kind of things in place. But what we've seen is with all this focus on governance, we've seen kind of people moving to an extreme, right? And so they're starting to take this governance and apply it across the entire intranet or entire collaboration or social platform such as SharePoint, and it's actually starting to restrict collaboration, if you can believe that. So we came up with something, and I can give you more details on this if you want to reach out and see it, but just an easy way to remember this is be rigid at the core and flexible at the edges. And I'll say that again, rigid at the core, flexible at the edges. And what that means is every organization has a core, right? You have a core, those non-negotiables. We've got to be HIPAA compliant, we've got to retain for 9 years or 7 years, and we've got to have this many versions or whatever it is. Those are the non-negotiables, right? The things that have to be in place. But if you start to really look at the non-negotiables, you'll realize that, one, there's not a ton, right? I mean, there's a handful, and every company's going to have different ones, but those don't need to be applied to some project site that's going to be out there for 6 months. And maybe some of those do need to be applied out there, but what we see is organizations taking things so far and saying, we've got to make sure that everything's check in and check out, and that there's content approval at every level, and that users can't create their own views, because then that would just let them, you know, go crazy and create their own things and whatever it is. And again, you got to have rules and you got to have some structure. But what we found, and I can talk to you more about all these different rules that people kind of put in place, and those are just a few. As you scale out, and that's why I say flexible at the edges, you get the core, as you scale out from kind of your core intranet homepage out to these kind of collaborative team sites, especially once you get out to like OneDrive and these things where kind of people are doing ad hoc, on-the-fly collaboration, loosen up a little bit, right? Be a little more flexible, because we've actually seen it improve collaboration and improve engagement and all kinds of other things, because people are working how they want to work. You need to have some flexibility in there to let people co-author if they want to and not have to check in and check out. Maybe that's a pain for them, or maybe this type of group works differently and it's one person internal and 20 people external. Well, they're going to need to work different than if all the people were internal. So giving people the flexibility to be able to kind of work how they need to work at these collaborative levels. You'll be amazed at how much more work people get done at those levels. A lot of organizations say to us, I can't loosen up because people will just go crazy and they'll create all of these kind of things and everything will go wild, and we just haven't seen that. Now, again, you've got to put some restrictions. You can't have everybody out there just creating sites. You've got to have some structure around that, and maybe that's one of the processes that they have to go through. But people aren't doing quote-unquote bad things out there because, one, their name's on everything, and if you give people the flexibility and the empowerment and the trust to kind of work the way they need to work, we just don't see people doing, like I said, bad things out there. So give them the rules, make it core, protect your core, but loosen up once you get out to the edges of that. And then the last thing I want to talk about is kind of this thing I call set it and forget it, and this set it, forget it mentality of, hey, once we're done with this project, we've done our intranet, we've got that box checked on my performance list or for our initiative for this year, let's move on to the next project. And I'll give you a perfect example. We have a client, they have 40 capital projects going on at one time, just within IT, 40 projects at one time. It was insane. So a huge risk, obviously, was just getting resources and people to do the project. But we had to work with them really closely to make sure that, hey, when this thing is done, it's not actually done. Intranet, collaboration, SharePoint, those projects are ongoing. There should never be end dates on your project plan, so to speak. There should be milestones, right? And so let's just use one example of a steering committee. We put that in place. They may be meeting biweekly or weekly as the project's really going on and early on in the project. Even after everything's quote-unquote deployed and rolled out, or through, let's say, phase 3 or phase 4, we still have the steering committee meet every single quarter. That's the longest they go between meeting is once a quarter, because you still need to adjust, right? Your business is changing. People are changing. People are giving feedback. People work differently. They've got new roles, new ways of doing things. So how are you constantly making sure that you don't end up kind of like this picture here as a ghost town because people stop using it? We had, one lady walked up to me at one of the conferences I was speaking at, and she said, I think we're through the honeymoon period. Everybody used it like crazy after about a year, and then they just stopped using it. And the first question I asked was, do you have a steering committee? Are you kind of reaching out to users, and are you capturing feedback from them? She's like, no, we haven't really said anything after we deployed it. Well, that's one of the reasons. So you've got to keep this going. I mean, people will use it day to day, but you'll lose that enthusiasm, that innovation, that engagement, and we've got ways to do that. I'll show you a couple tools at the end that you guys can use. So as we follow up in the next 10, 15 minutes or so, what I want to do is give you guys some practical tips to avoid this disconnect and start building kind of more collaborative intranets as you go forward. And hopefully you guys have seen some things already that will help you guys as you move forward. So this is from Wikipedia, kind of their definition of an intranet portal. And it talks about, it can help them find things better and do things better, but very few are optimal just out of the box. And here's the second part of that Wikipedia thing is basically, most of them have just become a mess, right? They're just really fragmented, confusing. The user experience, the design of it, how people get around, it's just a mess. And you can see some more stats here in addition to this 3 out of 5 or 63% failing. You've got over budget, deadlines, completely fail. I mean, there's a lot of things going on, right? So we talked about failure. So what I want to do is talk through 4 keys that I think you guys should take from here and give you 4 easy ways to start to build a more collaborative intranet. If you guys can take these things, and again, some of them are bigger buckets than others, but these 4 things and frame it up, and then I'll give you kind of some practical tips to go through this as well. But the 4 keys are think more strategically, right? It's more today than just a landing page, than just a pretty intranet and a place where you got a rotating banner and, a calendar of events and things that are going on, right? Think more strategically about how are you guys trying to use this. Forget about the intranet term or that it's SharePoint, but how are we trying to use this? What are some ways we can really leverage this to work with customers better or help our sales and marketing teams or work internally to make things more efficient? What are some things we can do? So again, think bigger about it, right? It's not so much just this nice place where you just put up and you push information to and they can read, the CEO's blog on it, right? We've got to think about how we actually want to use these and how we're going to, address those issues I talked about earlier with technology, the workforce, and kind of the business. And the next thing is really understand your culture. We work a lot with organizations on taking technology and integrating it into your culture. And this is something that's really near and dear to me, and I'm spending more and more time on and hope to be doing more and more blogging on is, as organizations, continue to grow and technology continues to get better, people are throwing, again, this technology into organizations that, one, may be a product of a bunch of mergers, so you get 3 or 4 different cultures going on, but a lot of times you're trying to put technology into a culture that just does not align, right, that just does not fit. And so does SharePoint even fit in your culture? Do you have a culture of sharing, of knowledge, of collaborating, right? Sometimes people don't even have that culture, but they want to use this collaborative technology and do this cool intranet, and their culture doesn't even want that, whether they know it or not. And I'll show you a way to kind of look at an assessment of your organization and where you are from a culture standpoint. Focus on people. We talked about that. I won't spend a ton of time on this, but a connected company is a successful company, right? How do I connect more people? Focus on people. Focus on people. If you can just do this one, I think you'll be much better off. Run everything through a filter of how is this going to affect people negatively, positively, how is it going to impact people, those kind of things. And then lastly, you never know how you're doing or how to do better if you don't measure your success. All of these presentations, all of these frameworks, everything we do to help our clients, I would say 99% has come from lessons learned meetings that we do. Learning, well, that didn't work very well. Well, that worked great. How do we take that and apply it? Learning from other projects you've done in your organization. Was there a person on a project that maybe every project went bad and this person was on it? Maybe that person's the problem. Just understanding how you're doing. And again, you can't measure your success if you don't know where you're going. You don't know which check boxes to check. So let's jump in, and I want to show you guys a few tips that you guys can take away, and then we'll wrap this up in the next 5-10 minutes. So in addition to all the upside of SharePoint and Intranet and these platforms, there's risk as well. And so that's what we always like organizations to see is that go into it with eyes wide open. Don't just look at all this upside, we're going to go to this super highway. And again, don't let it necessarily scare you off, but it should just at least make you step back and say, we should address those risks. And these are just few of many, many, many. Part of our luck storming process when we work with stakeholders and work with our clients is understanding and identifying the specific risk that exists within that organization for that specific project. And then we actually go so far with the steering committee as we assign every risk to a person, that they own that risk on a strategy for mitigating it. Can we eliminate it? Do we just manage it? What do we do? So every person owns a single risk. There is not a risk that is just like, well, I hope that doesn't happen. Every single thing is owned. That's something you guys should do. So understanding that there's a huge upside, there's downside. There's a lot of things that go wrong with these projects. How are we going to address those? How are we going to fix those? And that's where we spend a lot of our time is just helping organizations figure out what are the risks so that I can avoid those. have a plan, right? We've talked about that. Know where you're going. Build a business case. And I'll give you a few questions in just a minute on kind of building a business case, but this was a study that that came out, and I think it was, you know, I forget who it was, from Frost and Sullivan, I think, but talking about how much a company's performance was dependent on its ability to collaborate. And so again, take this back to your manager. Help us, you know, build a business case that says, look, guys, if we're not doing this well, here's all the things that are going on. I can give you numerous case studies and ROI and all kinds of things we've done of, if you don't do this right, here's what it's going to do for your organization. But if you do it well, it's going to be amazing. There's some great things that can happen from that. So 36% of a company's performance, you know, the bottom line is due to how well they can collaborate and connect with each other. So as you guys are building your business plan, ask yourselves a few questions. This is just a few easy questions. Again, not going to be everything. When we go through the luck storming, it's usually anywhere from 3 to 5 days we spend on site, and we customize them and build them based on where you guys are going and goals and things like that. But just at a high level, I love who, what, when, where, why, and how questions, right? So at a high level, who is this going to impact? Is it going to impact them negatively, positively? What does that mean? Is there anything we need to think about with that? What problems are we actually trying to solve with an intranet? What are we actually trying to solve? When will we know we're done? How do we actually know when we can check the box that says we're done with that? How are we going to measure that? Where are we actually going? Where do we want to end up, right? Why should our company invest in this? If you can't answer that question, nobody else is going to fund that and give you that money, or they shouldn't, right? And then 6, how does this align, you know, with our corporate mission, vision, those kind of things? Is it aligning with those? And we've actually found success goes up when you can align what you're doing with the corporate mission of customers or whatever's in your mission statement. We actually do it, you know, where we actually take the mission statement that organizations have and kind of align that with their business case. So ask some questions, build a good business case so that you guys can take it further and actually start to figure out what you're trying to do. The next tip is when you're focusing on people, just try to bring people together. It's amazing how far it'll go when you just start to bring people together and start to connect people. So I wanted to kind of show up here kind of what collaboration looks like inside of an organization, how that actually happens, right? So first and foremost, you have to connect people. You have to bring people together, and we put in here friction-free ways, right? Make it easy for people to connect. You can't force people to connect and make it, you know, them have to jump through hoops to connect with each other, right? So if you can get people together, give them a place that's easy to work, and bring them together, it's amazing how much kind of human nature takes over. We see relationships start to be developed. People start to, you know, have colleagues that are closer to them. They start talking more, start communicating, and from that, well, engagement goes up, right? So each of us is happier because we enjoy working with other people. That's just in our DNA, whether you like people or not, or say you're an introvert or extrovert, we all like to work with people, and it kind of awakens this bond to serve each other and work with each other, and engagement goes up. And I can tell you, when those 3 things happen, we always see it, that this kind of innovation and ideas begin to happen. It's amazing when you're in this mood and this state of engagement, how much that, you know, happens. And to put practically, I mean, these things are, you know, new product ideas, better customer service, better processes, getting more customers, whatever it may be. This innovation and how you define it within your organization, it always happens this way. But here's the key. People are at the heart of this, and people are at the center here, and you see that with those 3 people in the middle and not SharePoint. But not all of these connections are created equally. So I want to show you real quick, if I can go through this. We've got a few minutes left. I want to kind of go through this a little bit quicker, but reach out if you want to know more about this. But there was a sociologist in the 70s called Mark Granovetter, and he did this study of strong versus weak ties. And I want to kind of go through what that looks like. If you hadn't looked at it, just Google, you know, strong and weak ties on Google. So just imagine these are departments within your organization, right? And so every organization has departments, maybe these are some of yours, maybe they're not, and they've got these what we call strong ties between them. That's these orange lines here. And those lines and strong ties are people you work with daily, you work beside, you go to lunch with, close friends. And a personal side, they're relatives and things like that. So these are people that you're really close with. And what's interesting is that most of the time you have very few of these strong ties because they take a lot of effort to maintain, right? You've got to do a lot of work, and they've got to maintain them. That's just how it is. If you could count your closest and best friends, it's probably on 1, maybe 2 hands, right? It's not, you know, 50 people that you're really, really close with, because it takes a lot of effort to do that. So whether you know it or not, these clusters of information kind of exist within the organization. So you start to then, between these weak ties, build these silos, right? So now you got this silo of legal, marketing, finance, and then you got logistics and HR. They're kind of hanging out here. They're not connected to anybody, and this happens, you know, over time. And these are kind of what happens. So what we try to do is that if we try to connect these other groups to these stronger ties through what we're calling weak ties, these green dashed lines, it's amazing what happens. So these weak ties are people that you don't talk to every single day. Maybe you pass at the water cooler, maybe you speak at the break room or something like that, or you send an occasional email, or you're CC'd on an email. So maybe you're trying to connect logistics to legal, or marketing to logistics to develop a new piece on how fast your shipping is, or something like that. Well, by giving these groups ways to work together, what you do is you begin to open up this network within your organization. And the best example of weak ties we have today is LinkedIn, right? I don't know about you, but you're probably not best friends with everybody on LinkedIn. So on LinkedIn is a great example of weak ties and how the power of weak ties can happen. So I'll kind of go through this quickly. We can find ways to create these weak ties, and what happens when you do that is now the clusters and the silos go away. So how do we bring groups together? And again, this is where I want you guys to focus as you're focusing on this. I know it's hard to grasp sometimes, but when we're building this, how can we get logistics or groups that would never talk to talk? How can we give them a platform or make it easy just to create a collaboration space to do that? And that'll go a long way within your organization. So 2 things I'll go through real quick. Equipping people for success. So I talked about this before. 2 areas that we focus on when we say, hey, as you're going forward, how do we focus on the people? Prepare them and proclaim what you're trying to do, right? So get people involved, create ambassadors, create champions, get people engaged. And this key at the end here, start early and repeat. We start the training process actually in parallel with actually building servers, whatever it may be, infrastructure pieces early on. But so that by the time the project's done, people are ready to go. We don't do training as a quote-unquote event, right? Because what happens if you do training deployment? What happens when you hire 100 people next year, or 5 people next week? How do they get trained when the events happen? So we do what we call trickle training, and we set up processes so that training happens every quarter, every month for new people coming in. We have classes, setting up a framework for that. And then on the proclaim side, how do you connect people to the vision of what you're doing? We build communication plans with our organizations on who's sending out the message, when does it go out, what is the channel that it goes out, is it a poster in the break room, is it an email, how does that go out? Getting people involved, helping people understand, and making it easy for people to provide feedback. And I'll give you a tool that we built after that. And then one of the last things is keep the momentum, right? As you keep going, make sure you can measure how you're doing so that you can manage it. Make sure you focus on lessons learned. Make sure you develop repeatable processes that you're doing. Make sure, checklist and how you're capturing information. And we've got a ton of these different processes and templates and things like that. And make sure somebody owns everything, right? Don't just leave things up for chance, even down, like I said, to the risk. Make sure someone owns everything. And then one of the ways we do that is with a steering committee, right? Steering committee, if you guys haven't done it or don't have it, you've got to have that to make this thing successful. And there was a study, AIM did a study, and part of their study that came out said that there was a 30% increase in project success just by having this multi-departmental steering committee. So, I mean, that's a pretty big bang right there if you just put together a team. And we help organizations. We can help you guys put together a steering committee. What needs to be in there? I've actually got a blog out there on building a SharePoint leadership team. If you want to go to our blogs on .c5inside.com, you can see that one as well. So building those. So 2 minutes left. Perfect timing. I want to give you guys 2 tools that we've got right away, and we'll follow up probably with the email, this webinar with an email as well. But 2 tools you guys can go download right now. C5N.co, SharePoint readiness. This is case sensitive, so make sure it's just like that. Take a screenshot if you need to. And site feedback web part. So the SharePoint readiness is basically a quick 60-second assessment of how likely are we to succeed at SharePoint and building an Intranet collaborative project. How likely are we to succeed? It's pretty amazing how accurate it is. Go fill it out, take you less than 60 seconds, and show you basically where you stand and are you going to be above average or below average when you try to do this project. Just a few questions to ask. And then the site feedback, our clients love this. We give it out to all our clients. I'll give it to you guys on here as well. How do I capture feedback ongoing? So we've got this web part that when you click it, it actually pops up right there on the page they're on, captures the URL, and lets someone enter feedback about, hey, this navigation is kind of quirky. You'll be amazed at how adoption changes just by having this web part in there. So as I leave you guys, one, we're going to have a survey pop up. Please fill it out. Please let me know if this was good, if you hated it, any feedback, ask questions. I'll go through the questions. If you haven't asked them yet, ask them, and I'll answer all those. But again, we can't solve problems the same way, that we created them, right? We've got to think differently as we go forward. And that's what I'll leave you guys with today. Reach out to us. please reach out, get in touch with us. All kinds of ways to get in touch. Reach out on our website, follow our blogs, and follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter. And I really appreciate you guys sticking with us today, and hope that it was beneficial. Thank you, guys.